Welcome to Simple Talks. My name is Grant Fritchie. With me is
Ryan Booz
and
Steve Jones.
We all work for Redgate Software. Today, we want to talk about how great it is that we can use production data in our non-production environments.
It makes life so much easier when I can do that.
It's easier to test.
Absolutely.
If you
easier
just
to
delete my
develop.
name out of it, then you're great.
No, we don't want to delete anybody's names out. Oh, no. We're kidding. We're
there-
totally kidding.
Are we?
Yes.
You shouldn't do that.
No, you should not have production data in non-production environments.
I have been doing this wrong for
Yeah.
a long time.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
we got to talk about it. So,
Enlighten me.
So here's the deal. Redgate Software, we deal with tools, right? That's one of the things that we do is we make tools for database professionals to manage their data and their databases. One of the tools we make is all related to data masking and data subsetting. What's data subsetting, Steve?
So this is something I've been asking for a long time because, if I take a production database, which a lot of us have done, and I restore it in development, it might be a terabyte or 2 terabytes these days, right? Back in the days of a gigabyte database, it was easy. Now it's hard, it's complex, it's slow, and it's a pain to develop on. Like I occasionally will rebuild an index or update a table when I forget the where clause. I still do that at times. And when I do that, it takes forever, right? If I accidentally write a cross join and I forget to do a where clause, it takes forever. So I really don't want a terabyte data. What I would really like is a gigabyte of data or 5 gigabytes of data that represents the problems I'm trying to solve. So if I'm trying to do e-commerce, right, I just need enough customers and orders and products and things that I can write my code.
Right. Yeah, it makes sense. What's the problem with subsetting?
The problem is it's complex, right? It's complex to understand what tables, what size, foreign key relationships. You can't just take 10% of a table.
Of every table.
Of every table.
Of every
Right.
table.
Because
yeah,
then you
10%.
end up with foreign keys not existing and it doesn't insert or you
foreign
release.
keys. Nobody uses those things.
But then you can't query anything. Yeah. So it's not as easy as just saying select X from and
Right.
where something's below ID.
Right. Well, and the real challenge is that not everybody actually uses foreign keys. I mean,
I think most people don't use foreign keys at this
Oh
point.
no! Come on. Surely most people are using foreign keys.
No.
Most of the time.
No, I mean, our developers, bless their hearts, they were so optimistic. They said, we can just start with one table and walk all the foreign
The
key
entire
relationships,
relationship.
and we'd have everything fine. I'm like, that's not going to work.
Yeah. Well, especially because there's going to be multiple root tables, right?
Multiple tables, right? A lack of foreign keys. And then some tables, like you said, we don't want a subset, right? So like my products table, I may not want to subset that, right? I may only subset orders or customers or something else.
Sure.
So
And the reason we want to do that is, we were talking, which we'll talk in a second about masking, but even with subsetting, it's not just ID below something, because then you're not even guaranteed the same distribution of data.
right.
Yeah.
Or the
and
representation of how
matters.
things are, right?
Oh yeah.
So some randomness to make sure that you're getting a representational set of data is also, a part of it.
But you may customize that, right? So we may have a
100%.
general subset that says I want roughly 10% of orders with all the stuff around it. But I may do something where like I only want to work with this year's data for a particular problem. Right? Like we had talked recently about like if I was a utility type thing and I was looking at monthly time series data,
Yep.
right? Which is what you've dealt with a
Yep.
lot. Maybe I only want this current year's data to solve a particular problem or add a feature. So I need some flexibility, and I think we've tried to address a lot of those things at Redgate because we know it's just a general problem.
Yeah. It's a common issue.
And what you just said just made me also recognize and realize that, one of the reasons we often bring production data down is because we get problems from customers. And so we know the demo database we've set up for dev just does not show the same kind of functionality or the nuances or the unexpected differences in data
the
we
odd
never
bits.
thought about. And so that's why we bring it down, but being able to have that representational thing that's going to reproduce some of those problems for us in a way that ends up being safe as well is
Right.
really essential.
Like to me, and that's where subsetting creates tremendous agility because if I got a ticket right now, right, like it's noon today, somebody said I need to look at customer 5, I should be able to subset down just customer 5 and related data from production and work on that problem quickly and not have to depend on how old is my dev database, like when did we last restore it,
When
right?
was the last time we did that? Yeah.
What has changed, right? Like it would be so much easier if I could just point a tool and say, go give me this data for this problem and let me just work it.
Yeah, that's great.
Well, and then it brings up the next step, which is, okay, fine, we've got a smaller set of data, it's faster, it's more agile, there's a lot of really cool things there.
Yeah.
But you still have my name in there,
Yeah,
which I don't like.
your name is still in there. So what's
Do
masking?
you know how many Joneses there are in the world? No
I
one,
count,
come on.
I count on
Steve.
that. I do count
Steve and Jones. It's like it's not like Ryan Booz or Grant Fritchie.
Yeah, exactly.
There's really only one.
Although someone has taken my Twitch account.
Have
Like
they?
I went to get Twitch
no.
and someone has Ryan Booz. I'm like, I'm Ryan Booz everywhere, but who? So I'm trying to figure out who is this Ryan Booz?
Yeah, you know, it just in line with that. I had my wife search recently for me. She's like, "Where do you come up?" Like, I come up at like the bottom of the first page of Google for her, but there's all these other, like the Sex Pistols, Steve Jones, and the basketball player come up ahead of me.
The other developer at Redgate, who's Steve Jones.
He does
Steve
not.
in,
Yeah,
you know.
yeah. But there's also a professor in Canada or somewhere that comes up. So I'm
Okay.
slightly hidden.
There you go.
But not hidden enough. Okay.
Well, and funny enough, you search me up, and there's a congressman in Illinois.
Oh.
John Fritchie, not Grant Fritchie, but even though when you say Grant Fritchie, he shows up because
shows up.
grants, inside the
interesting.
bills and stuff. So
Nice.
So yeah, he comes in.
But we want to solve that problem. Like
Yes.
we don't want
No,
our
we
names in the development
Yeah.
system.
No,
because-
yeah, don't have my name in your system.
Even if we did,
Yeah.
we shouldn't because there's money on the line
Yeah.
with
Right,
being
absolutely.
sued and
So
data breaches.
so we have this thing we do called masking,
Right.
which literally updates the database and changes names. Anything else?
I mean, anything that's we would consider PII, right?
Yeah.
So
Right.
addresses, phone numbers, social security numbers, things like that.
And it's been, right, this constant problem that we've tackled often by, I'm sure you've written, right? We write a huge set of update statements that go, so set all emails to, 1 plus test.com, 2 plus test.com,
Yep.
right? We generate that list, or we change, everybody to Steve or everybody to Grant because it's easy,
Just
right?
easy.
Easy
Yeah.
way to do that kind of stuff. Or, what we've seen, I think, in the last few years is that customers want something that looks more realistic for their developers, right? So they do want things changed, but they don't want everything set to a pattern that's annoying.
And it's interesting you say that because even in something at Postgres, if you just change everything to user blah, 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 right, your indexes actually are going to perform differently from a distribution perspective than if it's
course.
just, Steve and then Sally and then, and whatever.
Wall-
Amy
I worry
and-
less about that because I see way too many people writing code without testing it.
Oh, I totally get it, but it is interesting because again, in Postgres it's heap-based, right? So it's not
Yeah.
like we get a clustered thing. We can't. So we want that distribution of
Right.
searching pages and understanding performances, and sometimes that really messes that up if you just everything's sequential and everything
Right,
works.
right.
And everything.
Well, I mean, it's not really any different in SQL Server because we're so dependent upon statistics.
Right.
And if the statistics distribution is, well, you've got one row for everything,
Yep.
or you've got all the rows for one thing.
Yeah.
Right, very different
The
plan.
behaviors are going to be
Yeah.
radically different than if you've got a little bit of skew, a perfectly even distribution. I mean, like you just don't know. And so you want your test data to look as much like production as you possibly can,
Right.
without leaking the PII everywhere. I mean, who was it just recently had the big breach?
AT&T, right? A big
AT&T.
one, right? There's another one. So the other thing that, right, we think about masking is we have deterministic and non-deterministic masking, right?
Okay.
Or kind of random versus a known way of masking things. And I think that's a problem we see people on both sides, right? Like originally the masking product Redgate, our developers were so concerned that everything was super random and you could never look at the development database and get back to production in any way. And some people are concerned about, like I hear that from customers still, that
Sure.
they are concerned about that. And then some people are like, I need to know that Steve always becomes Grant because I always look at that account to figure out if I've done something that works well.
Right.
Right.
Even if it's not so much Steve becomes Grant, there's always going to be a Grant in there,
Something
so
like
that
that.
I've got a repeatable test I can run.
Yep.
Right.
It's a big deal.
It's
And
a big
it's
deal.
hard to do independently because, again, the easiest thing because of time and just ability to think through that process of where do you store that information, how do you make sure things, if you want it to be deterministic. And
Right.
so, yeah, just having a lot of history behind us and understanding those problem sets. It's been helpful, and it's been interesting to see the iterations of it.
Did you guys have to lean one way or the other in that? Do you like deterministic masking? Do you like random masking? Is it?
In all of the development that I've done, because it's all customer based,
Right.
deterministic is just
Better?
better. It allows, exactly because of those tests. Like once we know what the determination is, we can identify client,
Right.
situations
Certain things.
internally at least.
Yeah,
allows us to do
I
that.
lean pretty heavily towards deterministic. I am uncomfortable with the idea that if somebody can see both production and dev, that they can then start to map. That gives me discomfort, but it's somewhat rare and somewhat controllable. And frankly, the ability to have a repeatable test kind of outweighs a lot of my discomfort.
Yeah, and I think I've come to think that the reality is that even if I was randomly masking things, there's a good chance if they could see all the data in there, they could map it anyway.
Yeah.
Right? Like the account value or right.
Or
Something happening
numbers,
at-
numbers,
yeah.
yeah.
Like there's a certain amount of stuff I think that they could guess, so that I guess I worry about that less. And it's more that I think you want it different enough that it's hard
Sure.
if they can't see production, right? I think if they can see production and your development, I kind of think that deterministic versus random doesn't matter anymore.
Well, especially if they can see production.
We're in trouble.
We're in
I mean,
trouble anyway.
we're already
The whole thing is-
we're already over the
Yeah,
line.
yeah. Like if they can go into Amazon and see my orders from a public thing, I'm in trouble anyway.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, but so then the other issue that you hit really quickly on this is like, what do you mask?
right. Which is a challenge.
How do you mask? Fine, but what do you mask?
And that's right. Like, have you guys ever tried to classify a database? Like, have you done that? Did you ever do it with the Redgate tool? Like, actually go through and go, I'm going to classify VentureWorks?
Yes.
It's a horrible job, right? Like,
It was a nightmare.
It's a boring, tedious process. And so I think that's the other challenge that I just haven't seen anybody solve perfectly or with a very high degree of confidence. Like, I think there's still a lot of human effort involved, right? Whether it's our tool, Microsoft's tool, whoever.
Yeah, or any of the tools. Well, I mean, we've worked with clients. I mean, I'll never forget this one client call. I'm going to try to be really careful here so they don't get mad at me. But they had really interesting column names, and they overloaded the columns, meaning that they had multiple data types stored inside of a column, and that there was like a sort of formula that wasn't really well defined. It was kind of like, well, Bob knows all about it, and so Bob does all the. It's like, what?
Yeah.
So,
but even in a general case, right? Like, think about if I give you a 9-digit number, what does that mean? Or a 10-digit number, right? In the U.S., we would go, well, it's a social security number at 9 digits. It's a phone number at 10 digits. But in the absence of a column that made some sense, something, you might think that it's, a PO number, right? It's like an ID number,
You never
not
know.
a tax number. And so it's funny that I talk to clients, they're like, well, clearly you know that's a social security number, right? And I'm like, I don't, right?
no,
Yeah,
you don't.
and American people think that, right? British people would say, well, the tax ID number looks like this, like it's like a couple letters and then numbers, right? And so you think about the problem space, it's a hard problem space.
It is. It really, truly is. I mean, so there's some real challenges there. So I mean, that's why you bring in tooling. Tooling's going to help,
Yeah,
but you're still going to have to do the Mark 1 eyeball, no matter what.
you do, right? And so I think that's an interesting thing.
I've never heard that said.
Like, I like the way,
That's an old one. Okay.
Redgate, we had the data catalog thing, which was good, right? It gave you a lot of ideas about what to classify and stuff, but it wasn't perfect. But now I actually like that we have this separate tool that will kind of guess on a lot of stuff and give you this JSON thing, which is then programmatically easy to work with, right? Like, we think
you can modify it.
we can modify it. Like, for us, we think about
version control. Like,
we can search for a column in a text file and then say, yep, let's paste in that needs to be masked with a tax ID or an email or whatever.
Right. Yeah.
and I think eventually, having a tool that allows you to define your own rule sets of what this kind of thing is. This is the randomness or the way that we need to redefine it.
Right.
Just super helpful. And you build on the requests. I mean, the tool, whether it's ours or something else, like it does build on experience as people use it, right? So you do gain, and so everyone wins. And I think it's one of the reasons we have tooling and we need to use it. And we talk about this all the time, Steve, right? It's what's your time worth?
Yeah, and it's time.
Well, that's
And
just
this
it, right?
conversation,
That's just it.
about subsetting and masking, is a huge time sink. It always has been in
giant.
every app I've ever developed.
yeah.
When you, especially when it's successful, right? Because suddenly you go from 50 gig database to 500 gig or a terabyte, and you're like, oh my goodness, now what do I do?
And now you never update, right? Like how many
Then it
customers do we
doesn't.
talk to that go, we update once a quarter, or, right, or once a year,
Yeah.
because it takes
Yeah,
forever
it's just too hard
to copy a terabyte down somewhere else, have the space, take the time to restore it, right? I know there's some people that have super modern hardware, like Thomas Grozer is a friend of ours.
yeah,
Like,
yeah.
He'll go, a
Got
terabyte's 30 minutes. We can restore that
there's-
instantly.
yeah,
But
Thomas
for
is
most
stuck.
of us,
Yeah.
a terabyte restore is still a major ordeal, right? So getting away from that is a big deal. And then having a masking process that many people understand, right? Because like I built scripts, but then I'm in charge of that.
Right.
And so I now have another job as a different software developer to maintain that script, which I don't want.
Well, and the other issue that you run into really quickly is that a lot of places don't mask. They don't worry about it. They don't sweat it until they get the breach.
Yes.
And then it's, we need it now. Yep. And
Yes,
and
then
boy, then is it hard.
Yeah, and right, we deal with a lot of people overseas. Overseas, there's legal regulations that everybody worried about. But in the U.S., I think it's more reputational stuff, or that your customers will leave, or they will sue you, or something, rather than a government regulation thing.
Right.
I think just the spaces, it's been very enlightening to see real data.
Yeah.
And to understand, again, we have experience, I have experience with something, but to see at a different scale, different problem set, different vertical, just the nuances of what this looks like. And it's been interesting to understand conceptually how to help clients.
Well, and I've gotten a real kick out of seeing the problem spaces that people kind of create for themselves in some of the design choices and development choices that they make, and then how down the road. I mean, we talk about technical debt all the time, but boy, it's a real thing.
Yeah.
And data is just as bad from a technical debt standpoint as infrastructure or code or anything else. It's just simply the data itself can become a technical debt that you have to deal with. And boy, this one, masking, subsetting, is.
I mean, it's a constant challenge, right? Because we're changing our schema, we're doing things, so that means I've got to be updating the way that I classify and mask things or subset things. And so that's where tooling becomes a big deal, because if you have to maintain the tooling plus the configuration of the tooling, that's two things.
Yeah.
Right? If I only have to do one, it's just one less things.
Yeah, just a bit less. Yeah. But yeah, that's cool.
But,
All right. Well, this is
Steve,
This is
Ryan?
I'm Grant. This is Simple Talks. Thanks for coming.
thanks. See you next time.